Blink. Uno, dos. One, two, tres, cuatro. Ba 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 da da. Do do da 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 da. Da, 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 da. It's Wednesday. I'm exhausted. Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy. I took a bus to the comic book store. Pick some do 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 do. I thought I'd let you see into behind the scenes. Remember that was my record. You guys never saw it at that angle, but people on Zoom saw it all the time. So I've had something of a week. Long story short, my car died. R.I.P. And so I'm pretty even more broke than I had been. I only got a couple because the buses are still free. So I after work today I took a bus up to the shop, and it was fun. It made me feel like I was 14 again. um, Except this wasn't a Saturday. It was the only difference. But yeah, I was able to pick up a couple books just because you know, like I can still is whenever times are tight, I still always kind of have at least a couple bucks for because for one thing, you don't want to. It's bad form to leave a bunch of books in your pull bag. So even if and he's totally understanding. He's like, I get it, because I have stuff in there I haven't bought yet, but that I will eventually once my horse comes in. So in the meantime, though, I really wanted to keep up on the X books, which I'll talk about in a minute, so I don't need to get into a lot of detail here. But suffice it to say, the Hellfire Gala crossover, makes me want to kiss my fingertips or those of a friend. That would also be fun. So Sword, Way of X, and Wolverine. So that will be fun. But like I say, I'll get into those more. Um, Also, this came out this week. Yeah, these are the X books that came out this week. So now I'm all caught up to this week. And this also just came out this week. This is Gamma Flight #1. This is a spinoff of the very, very good Immortal Hulk series that Al Ewing is writing. He's also writing this series. I don't know if this. I don't think it's a one shot. I think it'll probably be a mini series, if anything. Even if it's not in this day and age, this has been the case for years now. They used to announce a mini series ahead of time. Oh, this will be. They still do that occasionally, but what seems more common to me is there will be a new book, and sometimes by like issue 2, 3, or 4, usually like issue 3, I think it'll start to say number 3 of 5 on the cover. Like the first couple, I don't know why they don't print it there. Maybe they think they can squeeze more out of it if it's a hit. But that seems to be what also happens. What also most often happens is that a series will it like clearly got pitched somewhere along the line, and the editor was like, "All right, I'll indulge this idea," and it's meant to be just kind of a tryout book almost. And if it hits, then great, we'll keep making it. But if it doesn't, we'll wrap it up after 9 issues or 12 issues or however few issues. So that might be what Gamma Flight is. I don't know. But I'm also these have come out within the last like couple months. This is Daredevil 2930. I finally when my car died in Redlands, California, which beautiful place, terrible Mexican food, but really good ice cream, and also a nice air conditioned Firestone dealership that I waited for my roommates to come pick me up. I got to wait in their waiting room, but they had Wi-Fi and I had my tablet, so I started reading the Daredevil that I hadn't on the the Marvel Unlimited app, and I had started the arc. I think I read the first 2 arcs a while ago, and I was like, man, these are really good. But I had really kind of burnt out on Daredevil. Daredevil was and is one of my favorite characters for sure. But when I started collecting comics again in earnest, like superhero comics, I started being a weekly guy again. Daredevil was one of the first titles that I started buying again, and I didn't stop for 20 years or no. That was in 2001, I want to say, maybe '02, like early '02, and and then I think I stopped buying Daredevil in, I want to say 2018. Yeah, so almost 20 years, 16 years, something like that. And I'm proud of that run. Like, I like to have complete runs of books, and whenever I'm at a show, like a little con or something, and I see Daredevil, and I always check against my list. Like, if any Daredevils that I like, back issue Daredevils, I always buy those because they're usually only $1 or something like that. But I don't know. I think just for whatever reason, that book is always super intense too. Like, since Frank Miller did it in the '70s into the '80s, is this really gritty, dark. It's always this very noir-y, and that tradition is held. I mean, it gets goofy occasionally. No, not really. Not after Miller. It goes from Miller all the way up until Mark Waid took the book over. I want to say 2013 or 2014, and his was not so intense. His was like almost, I mean, I think he said that in interviews. He wanted it to be like, there were some fun eras of Daredevil, like in the '70s. Like, he's like, I wanted to do something like that, but it was still, I think, almost just by the nature of the title at that point, it still always felt really. It was good, and it was more lighthearted, but it was just like, I don't know. I think I just got sick of Daredevil. But Chip Zdarsky has been writing this book, and Marco Cicchetto has mostly been drawing it. The last 2 issues before these, because this is where the Marvel app usually is like a 6-month backlog. Like, they won't release a book for 6 months on the app. But since this last publishing year was cut in half, basically, they're adding it to it quicker. So I'm almost caught up, and this is only the second time this has happened in like the last couple of years. I dropped Runaways just not because I hated it or anything. It was just sometimes there's books where I'm like, they're fine, but I can't afford to get a book that I'm just fine with. Dropped it, but then I would read it on the app. I would just read it 6 months late, but it got so good that when I got to the end of what they had on the app, I was like, okay, well, now I need to get this book again. I had to find out what happened next, and that's largely what's happening with Daredevil. So what's happening in Daredevil is way too bananas for me to get into, but right now Elektra is Daredevil, and Matt Murdock, or Daredevil, is in jail for second-degree manslaughter, but he's in his Daredevil identity. He was not prosecuted as Matt Murdock, so his identity is still the same. It's like a weird. They wrote this into canon a few years ago, where superheroes could testify under oath without revealing their secret identities. Like, that was found to be, I don't know if it was I mean, it's ridiculous, obviously, but it's come up a couple times since, and I mean, there's people still like the secret identity shit. I don't get it. Why does anybody read any of this stuff? It's all for little kids. I'll tell you why, because it makes me so happy. And I feel like I've had a rough week, to put it mildly. I mean, but at the same time, things are great. Like, so I don't also really have any complaints. I'm just so exhausted. And comic books are really, really helping me get through a very tough time. This whole month, man. This, like, move and everything else. Well, you don't need to hear all my bullshit. So this was I'll get to this first, and then I'll get to the bummer. So last week I read Heroes Reborn, #7, and like I imagined, it focused on the Squadron Supreme as a whole, but also just again showcasing how power mad they are. It's so great because it's really obviously they're talking about the Justice League, and I frankly can never get enough of the Justice League being compared to Nazis. I don't know why. It's the little Marvel zombie in me, where I used to be defensive about Marvel's better. Wolverine rules. I invested a lot of my 11-year-old identity into Marvel Comics right away. No regrets. It's obviously very silly, but I was a child. What do you want? And this the spinoff of this week was Weapon X and Final Flight. So this is the Squadron Supreme essentially annexed most of Canada for the United States, and who's going to stop them? They're the Justice. I mean, they have the powers of Superman and Green Lantern and Wonder those aren't their names in the Marvel universe, but that's who they are. And so this is where Wolverine has kind of been this whole time. And yeah, it was really good. I mean, it features Sasquatch, who is a character I've always liked, but I don't like kind of how they do by him in this story. But yeah, it's still fun. And then so the bummer part was that the final issue, Heroes Return #1, came out this week, but the shop got shorted a bunch of titles, and of course they were all titles that I get. I mean, on the one hand, it was like, well, I wasn't gonna be able to afford that many anyway. But on the other hand, that was the first one I was going to get, was Heroes Return #1. I love this. Has been my favorite Marvel event. Gosh, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, because I enjoy all of them, and there's very few that stick out to me as being particularly bad. Infinity, which is a Hickman book. Gosh, I can't. But there's like, I don't know. There's. It's hard to describe. There's a level of fun for this. Getting all the references to the DC universe and getting all like the clues as to like, because I kind of figure it. I kind of think I know how it's going to end, and it's like kind of similar to Emperor Joker, which was a really good DC book. And which also referenced Marvel a bunch, if I'm not mistaken, or was that a different? I think that was a run of Superman and Batman that Loeb and McGinnis, yeah. What's his name? What's Loeb's name? Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness did an arc of Batman Superman where they meet all these characters from a parallel universe that is clearly supposed to be the Marvel universe. I always love stuff like that. It is. It's like watching. It's like I don't know. I imagine they still do, but Marvel and DC used to do softball games. Well, DC is based in LA now, so that might not be. But I don't know. I always like that kind of camaraderie. And also this one, the Marvel universe, the DC universe characters come off poorly, and it's like, yeah, Marvel's better. I also read these Star Wars books for the War of the Bounty Hunters crossover, which is still very, very good indeed. I had forgotten how in this Star Wars title that Charles Soule has gotten more into Lando Calrissian, which is great because he's always been a favorite character of mine, but it always felt like in the aftermarket fiction, I never read a whole lot about him. Marvel did a Lando miniseries around when Solo came out, and I remember liking it, but I also don't remember much about it. But it was also the Donald Glover Lando, which I love Donald Glover as Lando, but this is my Lando. This is Colt 45 Lando, and and also it got really into like the arc has really gotten into his relationship with Lobot, who is the guy in Empire who has that. He's like a part robot, like a cyborg. And so they got in the whole backstory about why they're so close and stuff, which has been really interesting. I never even thought to ask. But this is the stuff that has really been knocking me off my feet. I know this is a lot for as busy as I've been, but that's the other thing too about, and it's like kind of a good thing and a bad thing because these comics read so quickly. Like the old days, the old blah blah. Speaking of blah blah, when there's all sorts of captions and like Chris Claremont especially, and there was all kinds of expository dialogue and like whole pages. They'd have to do a page flashback every issue. All that's gone now, so it reads a lot quicker, which is like, oh good, it's more to modern tastes, I guess. But also, you paid money for it. Yeah, I often have to slow myself down to enjoy it, which is easy when you have Rod Reese drawing New Mutants these days. He doesn't draw the next issue, unfortunately. But this has been really good. The storyline is more. I'm not going to get super into everything, but a bunch of the former New Mutants are now training the children of Krakoa to use their powers. The Shadow King sticking his fat nose into everything, so he's messing all that up. X-Men. This was like and this happens a lot with Jonathan Hickman stuff. I find because there's so much of it, and he's such a minimalist, like just in how he tells stories. And it's great, but also it's really, for me anyway, like a lot of the details go right through me. But Mystique features heavily in this issue. It was really fun. This is the opening of the Hellfire Gala. Now the thing is, all of these books are all distinctive and they have their own creative teams. But whenever they do an interline crossover, it's perfectly linked, and I can only imagine because that is how Hickman kind of works. Like, and at this point, I've read every word that guy's written, so it's really cool. So like it's this huge gala, and there's all these cameos like Seth Meyers is there, and Patton Oswalt and his wife, and Conan O'Brien, and a bunch of other like Run the Jewels, I believe. We're like a rap group that are closely associated with Marvel, and then there's all these different plot lines going on, and so you see it from this window, and then it's like you get to the issue of X Force, and it goes, dude, and then you kind of see it from their perspective, and so like all these little plot holes fill in. I would imagine it'd be very frustrating to read if you didn't read every issue of the X line, but I do. I read every series. This one was really fun because the Hellions aren't invited, so they crash the joint. And there's a lot of that's another thing about this run of X Men is there's so much self-referential to so many self-references to their own continuity and like Aurora and Wild Child used to be a thing which I'd completely forgotten about and I may not even have known that in the first place, but I love that. Just bury me in continuity. Excalibur has not been my favorite book of this series, but it has a lot of Captain Britain or Psylocke as I know her. So she's one of my favorites. So I still do really like this. But to be honest with you, oh yeah, Richter's pretty much just being pouty this whole issue. And then now in this issue of X Men, this is where they actually, I believe, reveal the new team, the new official team of X Men who are like some obvious ones. And Wolverine is on it, but it's Laura. It's X-23 Wolverine. But I'm just glad to have a Wolverine. I'm pretty sure that was the issue where they, or no, maybe it was Planet Size X Men. Well, now I don't remember what the hell happens in this one. See what I mean? There's so many things going on. Plus, there's all this stuff going on in X Force where Hank is more or less I don't know. It's way too common, but more or less just taken over the population, or has allowed a like a fungal mind control sort of thing take over this island nation, and now that was hostile to mutants, but is now docile to them, and there's no crime, and everybody's like utopia, and the White Queen has found out about this. Oh, this was a great issue because Nick Dragata drew some of it, and then Russell Dodderman drew some of it. He's my favorite these days. Yeah, this is where they vote for the new team of X Men: Rogue, Sunfire, Wolverine, Sync, who I don't even know if I know that character, and Polaris, who I love. I'm glad to see Polaris in anything. But Polaris has been in a book pretty regularly for a while now. Children of the Atom doesn't really. They try to get into. They're trying to get into the gala, but it doesn't even. It doesn't have the. You know, it's not a. You don't definitely don't need this to read the whole crossover, but it's still fun. I think this is the issue. Nope, I was just saying that. What is in this issue? This issue was great though because it was planet size and fun. Oh right, so yeah, so in the this is the funnest part about this. So in all the previous issues, you see them all. You see events happen from different perspectives and at different times. And in a couple of them, they reference like, "Oh, the fireworks are coming up," and people are excited. And then in the next issue, it'll be right after the fireworks, and people are like, "Oh, what was the?" And we better get on. And then you're just like, "What the hell is with these fireworks?" And the X Men have terraformed Mars for Araco, which is this is like super deep continuity, and just into the last year though. There's the big X of Swords crossover where there's Krakoa is the mutant, the living island that they all live on, and its twin Araco, which was in the other world, an alternate dimension. So there is a big tournament to get Araco out, and blah 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 blah. It's honestly a lot of this particular storyline has been very dense to me. But now, so since they don't have Otherworld, I guess anymore, they put a Krakoan gate on Mars. I can't remember how now. I mean, the X Men have had like intergalactic travel for a long time, right? Why wouldn't they? Um, so yeah, they've claimed Mars. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go along with that. And then this New Mutants. What happens this one? I don't remember. I read it just this morning. Oh, this is one. This is more. I remember it focused more on Warlock because he's sad about his best friend got married. And then this X Corp has been really good. This is only the second issue, but this is another one where there's a lot of kind of corporate subterfuge going on. So I think I've never seen the show Billions. I've never seen the show. What is that? The one with Brian Cox. I gotta get my dinners into the oven. My dinner, not my dinners. I'm not that much of a pig. Anyway, so the X-Wing has been super fun. So that was why I couldn't pass up getting some today, and also just having a bus adventure. Like the poor person that I am that was picked up last week. All right, so since I'm home more these days, I have a little more reading time, but I also got to start looking for a car because I want my comic store job back. Thank you, and it's not this one, although I should get paid for this